Ice cold lemonade.
Hello again, and thank you for watching Home Geekery. My name is Bill, and I'm here to talk today about more Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Now, yeah, I did talk about the game in the last episode. However, I didn't get really much in too deep with it because I only had the game for about a week. So I was trying to give my general first impressions of the game. Well, now that I've had the game for over a month and I've got my kids to start making characters, and we're going to be playing the game real soon, I'd like to let you know what I think about the game right now. So, right now, I really enjoy the system. I think that it takes the Pathfinder First Edition rules and makes it a lot easier for people to play, especially when it comes to too much crunchiness versus, say, not enough crunchiness. This hits the perfect sweet spot. No, this game is actually well thought out and put together, and it's presented in a fantastic package. The art, the artwork, the tables, everything in this is phenomenal. The rule books themselves have been out since, I think, August, a few months now, and there's already errata on their website, which you can download as a free PDF. So I poured through the books again, and this time in detail. I went into every rule, every single aspect about the game and how to run it, and how to handle situations that I know my characters, my players, are going to throw at me when we start the campaign. I also went out and bought, first of all, the Dungeon Master screen, or sorry, the GM screen, not the DM screen. I went and bought the Pathfinder condition cards, total of 108 cards in there to keep track of what conditions your players may have. And finally, I bought the first module, The Fall of Plaguestone. So, armed to the teeth with all this, I had my kids create characters, and it went surprisingly well. At first, I thought that they were going to be confused because this is a new rule system, and it turns out they got the hang of it pretty quickly. In fact, that's the beauty of this edition of Pathfinder, is that you won't spend an hour or so creating a character and trying to understand them. In fact, you go in with what you have in mind of what you want to play, and then from there you create that character that you want to play. Now, I know my son preferred the method of not having to roll dice, but to pick and choose. My daughter, not so much. She is like me, where she prefers the idea of not having a character in mind at first, but just rolling dice and seeing what fate has in store for that particular character. But that's the way I like to play, and apparently she does too. But also, in the book, it says you don't have to do it that way. You can roll for your scores. But I just wanted her to see how it felt to do this way and keep everybody on the same page, you know?
My name's Ariana. Yeah. I'm gonna be talking about my thoughts and things on Pathfinder 2nd Edition and what it was like making my character, I guess. So, I created my character, a cavern elf, herbalist, alchemist. So, basically, there are sub-races of elves, and my choice was a cavern elf, which is pretty self-explanatory. It's one that comes from a cavern. And my class was an alchemist, specifically bomber. Again, there are subclasses. And my background was an herbalist, which basically gives abilities to both race and class.
Alright, it's me, Orion. Yeah. Gonna be talking about, I believe it is Pathfinder 2nd Edition characters. Made this character. His name is Bob, because I'm bad at naming. He is level 1. He is a dwarf. He used to be a criminal. No being around that bush. He is a bard maestro. He has an HP of 19 as a bard. His spells are random stuff like Soothe, Shield, Mage Hand, Detect Magic, magic missile. Of course, the basics. Magic missile is a must-have.
I think the easiest part to make this character for me was coming up with the ability scores. And it's kind of funny that I say that because I don't like the system. I prefer rolling dice when I make a character just because I like making it have a true character. It's more fun to play something that's less even. It's more fun to act like a 3 in intelligence and a 12 in charisma. Like, it's more fun to do in my opinion. So I prefer actually rolling dice to get results. But I think that this system is definitely good for beginners, for people who have never played anything like it or have never touched anything like it and need an introductory. I think it's definitely a place to start because it's very straightforward in that area.
Oh yes, definitely. I personally don't like the random factor because I like having things consistent and like just I like not having random because kind of makes it feel like if you get a bunch of bad rolls, oh hey, that's not fair. But if you get a lot, I didn't earn that, dice did. I think it was extremely easy creating a character for considering most other things have you do way more things, but
I really like the third page of the character sheet, which is typically the second page in D&D's system, is all about getting into details about your character. And I really like how this system was set up. Instead of saying where it tells you to put things in, it doesn't just say, is it a girl or a boy, and is it an elf, human, gnome, whatever. It asks for ethnicity, nationality, birthplace, age, gender and pronouns, height and weight. And I personally really like the gender and pronouns things because I feel like a lot of role-playing systems don't offer minority genders such as bigender, gender fluid, and it helps you like validate yourself and put yourself into the game. Like if you are of that minority and you have trouble accepting that, you can put yourself into the game and help yourself cope with that. One thing I really like was the catchphrases section, because I just had a lot of fun coming up with catchphrases for my character. I just went all out. I had that'sthebomb.com and simple yet effective. And I haven't come up with any more, but I definitely will, and it's a blast to do.
he has a bagpipe. It is very dear to him, so no. That's just about it.
Pathfinder 1st edition, I had a lot of trouble with. Everything was super confusing to me, so it's nice to see that they simplified it, but I would like to see if in a later edition they could perhaps simplify it less, but still simplify it.
And this bard is a 19 max health. I could have chosen heavy armor and basically just make him a warrior, but his class says as a bard, but I don't want to do that.
Oh yeah, I never said the name of my character. Lavia Slynn, that's her name. I even drew a little picture of her. I've been drawing her, I don't know why. All in all, I don't dislike this system, and I definitely think it's good for people who are very much beginning with the concept of role-playing games and tabletop games like that. D&D 3.5 is weird. It's weird. D&D 4th is worse. I'm not getting into that.
So, creating a character is really, really easy. So, the first thing you want to do when creating a character is, 1, create a concept. Have an idea of what you want to play like. You want to play a dwarf assassin? Or do you want to play like a goblin warrior? I mean, you can do that. Step number 2 is you're going to build your ability scores, but it's not going to be the way you're used to it. Everything starts with a 10. Every ability score is a 10, and from there you're going to pick and choose your ancestry, which is kind of like your race in this version. in this edition. So throw the word race out the door and go with ancestry. That's the new term. In the ancestries, they don't have half elves or half orcs. They do, but you would look under human because most importantly, they're half human. So that's where you'll find your half orc or your half elf character under the human ancestry. Now, each ancestry has what they call boosts and flaws. Each one is probably best done by putting for a boost a little plus sign in the box and a flaw a minus sign. For every boost and flaw is 2 points. If it's a boost, you get +2. If it's a flaw, you get -2. With everything at 10, you count the boosts and flaws and add them up, and that becomes your new score. For instance, if you had strength, it starts at 10, and you had 3 boosts and 1 flaw. After everything's been said and done, you tally them up by saying, okay, 3 boosts is a +6, so you're at 16 strength, but 1 flaw, take away 2, you're at 14. 14 would be your final score for your strength. There are other things that will factor in and determine those boosts and flaws, such as your class, which you will pick. But first, the fourth thing you want to do is pick a background. After you determine your ancestry, pick a background. Now, the background will start you off with some free stuff, as well as some, I guess, an idea of what your character has done before. And this is good for determining your skills and some abilities. And for instance, my son, he is playing a bard who is a dwarf, and he chose for some reason the criminal background. I mean, sure. So he wants to play a bard who's also a little bit of a shady character. Now, of course, next step is number 5. You're going to choose a class. The classes are kind of like what you expect from a role-playing game you've played before, except there's a few subtle differences, like, for instance, there are no paladins. There are champions, which is a paladin is a form of a champion. Same with knights. So after you've chosen your class, you're going to tally up all those boosts and flaws in your ability scores and get your final scores. At step number 7, you're going to add up those little details in your character, like, for instance, adding up your hit points, for instance. Step number 8 is a favorite among players that I know. It's buying equipment. Everybody starts off with 15 gold pieces. Now, this is done in the decimal system as far as money goes, where 1 gold piece is equal to 10 silver pieces, which is equal to 100 copper pieces, etc. And 1 platinum piece is equal to 10 gold pieces. So it's really simple to do. Now, everybody starts off with the same amount of money, 15 gold pieces, and have your way, have at it. As long as you can afford what you want to buy, spend away. But keep in mind, everything you purchase has a weight, which is called bulk here. And characters can carry, so much bulk before they're encumbered. And the next thing you want to do, step 9, is calculate all of your modifiers, like your perception, your to hit, your armor class, all these other things that you need to do. Step 9, you're going to calculate all of your modifiers that you have, such as your perception modifier, your saving throws, your melee strikes, and your ranged attacks. All the skills you have and have picked. And skills are another thing that we'll get into in a little bit. And step 10 is finishing details. Pick your deity, determine your age. So now let's talk about skills. You'll be receiving skills through various things like your ancestry, your class, your background, what have you. Skills are way different than anything I've ever seen before, and I think it's the best way to do it, in my opinion. Rather than the encumbering 3.5 edition and Pathfinder 1st edition rules, it's no longer the old, here's a skill, you pick one, a class skill and a cross class, and you add, no, that was just too confusing. None of that nonsense. In this one, skills are a lot easier. Skills are now done by having various levels of the skill. There's untrained, where anybody can have the skill. Let's say you wanted to, go and create a diversion. Anybody can do that without having to be trained. So that would be untrained. You would get a +0 on your roll for your skill check. That would be your proficiency. Now, a skill check is made by adding together your ability score that is connected to the skill. Like, for instance, I just told you about creating a diversion. That would be the deception skill, which is currently governed by charisma. So if your charisma is a +1 and you're untrained, you would get your attribute bonus, which governs the skill, in this case charisma, so you got +1. Then you would add your proficiency bonus, which goes from a range such as untrained, trained, expert, master, and legendary. And the proficiency for each one is +0 for untrained, +2 for trained. If you are an expert, you'd get +4. If you're a master, you get +6. And if you're legendary, you get +8. So, now that we are not trained, but we have a +1 in our charisma, it would be charisma gives the +1, untrained gives us nothing, and then any other bonuses or penalties that the DM sees fit. So in this case, I would get a +1 to my create a diversion roll. Now, there's also something called simple DCs. You know what a difficulty class is for a roll. Well, the DM has a really good option of having simple DCs. If there's something that the players and characters want to do that the DM thinks can be just a simple difficulty, you can assign them as such. If something is an untrained, in this case me creating a diversion were to be untrained, the DC would be 10. If it was somebody who was trained, the DC would be 15. Expert would be a DC of 20, a master a flat 30, and a legendary DC 40. And this is because it's trying to balance out the pluses that they're going to get. So this way it evens out. Now let's talk a little bit about feats. Feats are gold in this game. They are wonderful. Like in other RPGs, you gain a feat every so many levels, and of course you'll start with one most likely. And feats are amazing. In fact, they govern dual class and multi-classing characters. Let's say you're a barbarian and you want to do some healing. You can take a feat which allows you to take a feat of cleric. And there are what is called general feats, which anybody can take. And there are also class feats, which do have a prerequisite to take. And magic is handled much like if you're used to playing 5th edition D&D. Relatively similar. You've got your spell slots, and you can cast spells at a higher level than what they are as long as you have access to those spell slots of those levels. But they've added a couple of things differently. For instance, of course you've got your magic schools like alteration, divination, conjuration, enchantment, evocation, and transmutation, but they've added 2 more, the School of Illusion and the School of Necromancy. Okay, and the real meat of this game is combat. They've taken combat to another level. They've created a system where it's so easy to understand and grasp, yet brilliant, where every character and monster gets 3 actions. No more, no less. Of course, there are free actions, and there's also reactions, which can happen, but as far as every character has 3. You can move, move, move. You can attack, attack, move. You can move, attack, move. Some actions actually, some things you can do actually take more than 1 action. There can be something that you can do that would cost all 3 of your actions, or just 2. Same with spells. Each spell has a casting action number. It's not something that's too difficult, and it's not something that's too easy. It's perfect, and I can't wait to put my players through it. As far as the GM screen goes, I purchased this through the Paizo website. However, I mistakenly bought the wrong one. I really wanted the portrait size one, which is a Paizo website exclusive, but silly me, hit the wrong one to order, so I'm stuck with it for now. I do like the artwork on this. Very, very worth the price. Next up, I have these condition cards. There are 108 cards in total in this deck, and it's essential because remember when you first started playing 5th edition D&D and all of those conditions, you had no idea what they were and you had to look them up to see? Well, this is a lot easier. And I believe there's 4 of each condition in here. For instance, hidden. You can just hand that to your player. And it says, enemies, -2 AC. They're flat-footed. A DC 11 flat check just to target you. So it's all there. All the rules on the cards. Very, very nicely done, guys. Next up, The Fall of Plaguestone. The first adventure module. I bought this immediately. And I got to tell you, I've been through this one. I'm going to say I've read it about 3 times. Mostly to get a very good understanding of what's going on and the villains that the players are going to be seeing and meeting and fighting and the locales and everything about this module. I like it a lot. I wouldn't say it's the best module ever made. Of course, that still goes to Eric Mona for the Whispering Cairn. Anyway, I do think it's well done, and for a beginner's adventure, I would say, yeah, for people who've never played a game before, this is a really, really fun but tough adventure. It'll get them to think outside the box a few times. I think that the bad guys are perfect and the monsters are just right. I can't wait to see what they've got for us next. Well, that's been my talk about Pathfinder 2nd Edition for having it for a month. And now that I know a lot more about it, I really can't wait to get my hands dirty and play with the kids. So, be sure to check us out next time when I do run the kids through some adventuring and see what befalls them in the town that is known as Plaguestone. Also, I'd like to give a shout out to Aaron. Thanks again, sir. The product is wonderful. I cannot express enough. You guys got to go out and get this. This is phenomenal. Also, Fantasy Grounds. I've been playing Fantasy Grounds. They have the Pathfinder 2nd Edition rule set up there, as well as I've got the beta test of Fantasy Grounds Unity, and where also Pathfinder 2nd Edition is loaded up on there. So I can't wait to try it on there as well. All right, well, this wraps it up for another Home Geekery, and remember, the family that plays together stays together.